I used to work in what is now considered a golf course in New York that has a restaurant type setting in what used to be a residence back in the mid to late 1800s. It was created here in 1852. The building is said to contain the stones from Whitby Abbey, a 13th century North Yorkshire, England ruin. It was private until 1921 when it became part of the country club. Now this was a seasonal job in a professional kitchen as a salad/dessert worker. I worked in the food industry for 11 years, but it was never this high end. The exterior is a gorgeous sight to behold, if you're into structure and especially history. The moment I laid eyes on it, I took out my phone and looked up the history. I get giddy doing this. I even did that to my first apartment. I like to learn new things. So this place looked like a mini castle. Mind you, it was a personal residence at one point that had 3 floors. Offices were on top, occasions and events were held on the second, and then there was the basement. Where maintenance workers changed, they needed condiments and spare dishes. The basement, it just gave off an eerie feeling. Not at first. I wasn't paying attention to it at first, but as I got comfortable, the more relaxed I became, the more I felt it. After about a month, it started. You walk into the basement through the hidden stairs that's tucked to the side, hidden from view of the customers. The moment you touch that cold stone floor, you could feel eyes just watching you, and it was always coming from the opening of the side room where the boiler was. It never passed that walkway. You couldn't see it, but you could feel it watching you come and go. Like a child on timeout in a corner and waiting for their parents to tell them they can move again. I had to go to the basement to get my chef's smock in order to work. This was about 6 years ago, so I was old enough to know there was someone there, but also to know that ghosts were taboo or unbelieved by the majority of civilization. So I kept this to myself like a sad but dirty secret. One day, I was in the bathroom and a fellow chef came in. She was changing, and I heard her excusing herself if I were to see anything I shouldn't. But she was unable to change downstairs because she felt someone was watching her. From that room. From that specific boiler room. My head jerked a bit back hearing her, and once I stepped out the stall when I was done, I turned to stare at her to make sure she was being serious. She was. She said the exact same thing I felt. Someone was in the boiler room, silently watching us. I admitted I too had gotten that feeling when I went to the basement. I thought it was just me. It only confirmed that it wasn't, and I wasn't losing my mind. As I was washing my hands while she changed, I kept my head low to prevent any accidental glimpse. Though I explained to her it kind of made sense if you know the history of the place. She only told me what she knew, which everyone knew. The bricks were from an actual castle. With that I confirmed according to my research that yes, they were from a castle from England. The castle was found in ruins, so the creator decided, why let the bricks go to waste, I guess. I wanted to say something, but my tongue was fighting my teeth to come out and say it. So I did. I explained that because of what might have happened within the walls of the castle when it was in its peak, one could only imagine what hell had been placed during the horrid times of kingdom reigns, tortures of prisoners, etc. Whatever part of the castle they took, they might have brought a friend with them in the process. Or only God knows what was buried here before they built the residence. But if that was the case, wouldn't it have been free to roam instead of being confined to one room? All I knew was we always tried our best to avoid the basement if necessary. Built in 1852, the building is said to contain stones from Whitby Abbey, a 13th century North Yorkshire, England ruin. Now, there's an area above the basement that is allowed for customers. That's the bathroom. When you get to that first level, there are 3 doors to that floor. Men's to the left, women's straight ahead, and to the right is what they made into a dressing or changing room for the main guests for events they host. Now, I don't pay much attention to any room except where it needs to be. 1, the bathroom, 2, main kitchen, 3, prep kitchen, and 4, basement where I get that eerie feeling. I didn't get any eerie feeling from any other room as I did in the basement, so it wasn't like the attention was needed for anywhere else. One day, I walked downstairs to the bathroom. I walked past the changing room and something caught my eye and a feeling came upon me. The room door was open, and when you walked past the door, you could see what looked like a 2 or 3-seater sofa next to a small bed table for the lamp. A bit deeper in was a makeup table with a mirror and a chair in front of it. I always see myself in that mirror when I walk by it, when the door is left open. But that day, the glimpse of an old woman sitting in the chair staring at herself in the mirror, her hands resting on the surface. I caught the white of her hair as it was up in a bun. She wore a dress that seemed a bit old, but it was long. The face I couldn't see. It was faceless, and her head was slightly hung, but she was in the room with the light off. Mind you, this was a quick 5-second catch of the eye. A 5-second catch that made me stop at the bathroom door, hand on the doorknob, asking myself, what the fuck did I just see? No customers were allowed in till a certain time, and no worker fitted that description I caught of her. I stared at the door and slowly let go of the bathroom knob so I could walk towards it. Because of course, you walk towards things that you know shouldn't be there. I would probably be the first idiot to die in a horror movie. I stand in front of the room door, the only other way out, and this time, the mirror is completely free. No one was in front of it but me. The chair was free and sitting under the respective table. No old woman. I read a bit more into the castle's residences after that. Her appearance seemed to be up to date to be from the castle's origins in England, so it had to be the residents of the castle after it was built. Turns out that room was the owner's mother or mother-in-law's bedroom. It was her favourite room. So this was just last night. I was on the phone with a friend, and I usually have my Switch on the TV, watching YouTube videos. Now, having it been idled for a while, the Switch turned off, and a few minutes after, the TV followed as well. Now, as I'm talking on the phone, I heard something and I looked at my TV, and my TV was literally shaking, like someone was wiggling it. Not turning, but shaking. I'm staring at it and it just continued, as if someone was trying to get it to work. I'm staring. Are you serious? Now I'm completely quiet, and my friend on the phone was asking if I was okay, and I said, yeah, but dude, my TV is shaking on its own. At that moment, the TV came to a sudden stop, as if whoever was shaking it heard me. And out of the corner of my eye, as I was staring at the TV, a partial white figure walked out my bedroom. Me, being dumb, yelled out, "Oh, come on, you broke the first rule." I know there are some here in my apartment, and I have animals they play with. I've caught them on video playing with orbs. And when my animal stares behind me, all I say is, as long as you don't show yourself to me, we're fine. So my roommate of 7 years broke a rule. So I'm going to talk about my mid-year living in this apartment, because I find it hilarious. You see, I'm a very quiet introvert. I wake up, play games, watch movies, go to work, and come home to do it again. My home has tranquility and solitude, so all is calm, like the lakes where only the wind moves the water. Now, during this time, I was trying to help a friend get away from her horrible living situation with family. I've known her for a few years since college, so it wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. I was just sick of hearing the BS she was put under because they felt, since they are family, they have a right to use and abuse her. I know what it's like, but her issues were a step up from what I went through. So after my fiancé at the time had left to go back to his home to help with his family, she came in a few months later. Might I add, before I finally got her in though, I helped her get a job in the same place I worked at so she can have her own money. Before she got the job, I told her, if she stood with me, she could stay rent-free till she gets a job, and a month after that start, we can talk about payments. So I got her the job, and the first month she stayed rent-free. She bought whatever she wanted, and I made no objections. At this time, I had tons of cats, so we shared a room, while I had the other room with the cats locked in. She had nothing to sleep on but my bed, so we figured why not. I slept on the sofa. Now she liked to be entertained and wanted me to constantly entertain her, chat with her, etc. She has her own little TV with a PS4, and I have my big TV where my Xbox is set up. She liked a lot of chick flick movies, while I enjoyed horror. So when she felt something was great to her, she would force me to watch it. I would let her watch it on my big TV, but I wouldn't pay much attention to it, and that would annoy her. Within the first month, she has a ton of things, literally, get me angry, because she found how I acted hilarious, but she would always say, as long as you don't throw me out, you can do what you want to me. One time, I was growing more annoyed and rather angry towards her, reminding myself, I'm helping her. I didn't want her to go back to what I was helping her stay away from, but the fact I was being disrespected just to intentionally get a rise out of me was going too far. When I get upset, my accent changes, and she finds this hilarious. I was born speaking English in a Spanish family, but I enjoy mimicking accents. But when I get upset, my accent rises from English to some New York Italian accent, and she stops when she starts hearing the Spanish accent, because that means she's hit the red zone of my anger, and that's when she backs off. The rising anger out of me started causing the flow in my apartment to feel different, almost like the pressure the moment you walk in. At the end of the first month, all I asked for was 20 to 40 bucks a week, starting her second month with me. She agreed till I realised she lied after 2 weeks and still no money. Talked about how she had no money after the phone and the weed and buying food. Being fed up, I was cooking something and she took out an 18-count carton of eggs. As she was about to put it on the counter, not fully on but halfway, I stared and said in my head, I hope that shit gets smacked out of your hand. At that moment, the egg smashed to the floor, and from the way it literally looked like someone smacked it out of her hand. I stared at this, and she jumped back and went to save the ones that didn't break. I didn't tell her anything, as I just felt it was her clumsiness. Over time, since that day, things, even at work, were being thrown out of her hand, or smacked out her hand, like spanking a child's hand, telling her not to make her drop it. She even told me that she was in the shower, and she felt someone watching her. All of a sudden, I heard her squeal and she came out quickly. I asked what was wrong, and she said she felt something just push her in the tub. I sat there like, oh crap, what have I done? A lot of weird things have been happening around her since that day. At the end of the second month, I threw her out. She became too much and was too disrespectful, even at work. I became rather vulgar to her after a while before I threw her out. The day or two after I did so, I approached her at work and apologised for throwing her out, but she left me no choice. For a few months after, she went back to her mom's house when I threw her out. She told me that these weird things are still happening. I told her about my roommates after we were at work, and she held some tongs for tossing a salad, and they literally slapped her out her hand and slid across the floor. That day, I told her that my home has others, and from you pissing me off, you ruined their flow, and probably is making you pay for disrespecting me in my own home. In their home, after all I did for you. After a while, she no longer had those problems, but things were going downhill for her, because a friend was doing to her what she did to me. Although they didn't live with her, she was going above and beyond for them, only to be mistreated. After she came running to me many times about this, I got fed up, and when she said I'm sick of apologising to people when I didn't do anything. So I told her that she needs to get over it, because this is your karma for what you did to me. Not once did you ever apologise after all I did for you, and I did a lot. Any of your friends or family ever did for you, so what your friend is doing to you, you have done to me. So don't come to me crying. My home is sort of back to being a solitude. The energy is back to being tranquil. But I had to give up a lot after my emotional trauma. Now, I've lived in my current, which is my first apartment, for 7 years. I was in my late 20s when I left my mum's apartment that had her own spooks. I'm not gonna lie, I was scared. Not of the neighbourhood or the people, but not knowing what I was going to deal with alone. Every time I was left alone in my mother's house, I was always messed with by what or whoever was in there. Since I was 6, this has been happening to me. But this time I didn't have anyone to run to. I had my cats, and I felt they would protect me. I was paranoid at first, but after a while I was okay. Now as I got comfortable, figured, okay, quiet, silent, nothing is in this house to that stature to worry about. I have a 2-bedroom and one room was originally supposed to be an office or video game room, and the other the bedroom. I would lock my cats out of the bedroom so I can sleep on multiple occasions. And I make sure I close the door. One day, I woke up and I saw my door slowly open. I inhaled so hard and jumped up to see my cats waltzing in. This happened on several occasions. Even when my fiancé at the time was there. He tries to say he probably didn't close the door right, but one day, I saw his messenger open. And he wrote to a friend telling them, I closed the door. There was no way in hell that door was even able to open on its own with just a small push. I sat there at night, just staring at the door. Now, I freaked out more because after we made the office into the cat's room and moved everything into one room, office stuff in the bedroom, we would close the cat's room and my bedroom. But yet, we wake up every other day with both doors opened. And the cats on us or waking by climbing us. One time, I was on my sofa in the bedroom because I had to throw out my bed. And I saw my closet door just shaking, like someone was in the closet moving around. But the cats were not anywhere in my bedroom, they were locked in their room. The mirror looked like a portal effect as the pressure of the movement was coming from the middle of the door. But the door is open and no one is there. I just stared at it. But by this time, I wasn't as terrified of it, but that's when I had accepted that I had others, and I video recorded a few times to catch the cats playing with the moving orbs. So I made the rule. As long as you don't show yourself, we're fine. I've been working in an industry for 11 years. 8 years at one location and 3 years at another. Now I'm not sure since I go through a lot, whether or not it's the same one or I just happen to be in the places where the unseen are. But then again, only the Lord knows what has been put in this ground before man put it above. Now this experience hasn't happened a lot since it's at work. I'm not as attentive since it's a fast-paced environment. Dealing with food orders and incompetent workers will do that to you. But there are times where I've been alone when it's slow. Others are on break or called out or told not to come in, etc. I'm on the line cleaning up, fixing a small order. Out of my peripheral vision, someone walked over towards my direction to walk past me, but they were never seen walking away. Mind you, I'm on the line where the food is. It's a straight path to the doorway, so there are no turns. I even witnessed this once or twice at the register. Again, there are no turns behind me or anything where this person can jump over and hide. It's always an old man in a white shirt. I don't get to see anything else because by the time I get to give any visual attention, he's already about to pass me. He comes out of nowhere like he took a sudden turn or something. What creeped me out more was when they or he walks past me. You can feel the gust of sudden wind of someone having walked by you at a fast pace, as if they were in a rush. So I'm looking forward, and he rushes behind me, and I see him approaching me from the right, but I never ever see him leave to my left. It's like he disappears right behind me. I don't usually ask anyone if they saw anything or if they walked by unless I knew for sure. I try not to look as crazy as I normally already look. I feel straitjackets don't suit me. Other than that, nothing out of the ordinary. Besides that, really happened in this location. Well, to me anyway. So as much as I've had the elderly man sneak up behind me, in the second location though, this location had stuff happening. Not as often, but it still happens. I've worked in this location for 3 years since the other one closed for good. I've opened and closed this store as I had the other store many times, sometimes the same day. But the closings? Sometimes they don't go off as easily when you're the last one out and waiting for the manager to drive you home. Or waiting inside till the next bus arrives because it's freezing cold or suffocating hot. I'm a trainer, so I know how to close the majority of the store. Mainly the barista, line and register. That's really the main ones I close. Again, sometimes on the same day. Now in this location it's a bit different. I still have that person walking by me. Again, I keep this to myself. I'm not the same man though. That's a definite. At night when I'm alone, literally the only humans left are 2 or 3 and they're downstairs. You can see where the stairs are at. If anyone is there and fucking with you, no one is upstairs there with me. The soda machine sometimes goes on by itself. And I don't mean the humming noise a machine makes. I mean you can hear someone pressing against the chosen soda and the noise it makes when it dispenses the sugary liquid. At first I thought it was the machine, and due to being pressed 1,000,000 times a day, I'm pretty sure a button or 2 will wear out and malfunction here and there. Wishful thinking, I know. Now this has happened a few times. Not consecutively, so I just brush it off. Soda doesn't go all over the place. It's just those taps that allow the soda to go for like a split 2 to 3 seconds. But the part that confirmed my mind was right was when you hear a chair being moved. Again, I'm the only one on the floor. There's the last 1 or 2 downstairs and only 1 staircase that you cannot go past without being seen. No one is on the floor in the dining room at all. But you can hear a chair adjust, a movement. It comes from random spots in the dining room. You don't see them move since there are dozens of chairs, but you hear them. One day, I swear I saw someone rush, like a dark blur, go to the bathroom, and I thought it was the manager or worker that was left. But no one came upstairs. I figured maybe I wasn't paying attention and they came up. It could happen, since I'm not the brightest person there is. Suddenly, I see my manager coming from the staircase, whether by himself or with the second to last worker downstairs. Besides the old man, there's a shadow person that's in the location. It moves fast, so I'm not sure if that's why I can't see him, or if he's just featureless. Now I thought it was just me, until one of the new employees had been there for a few weeks, and he was closing by himself. After a while, he sat me down as he waited for our rides or bus. He looked at me and was like, "So, how are you handling the new job so far?" "I need to ask you something." "Huh? Everything all good?" "Yeah, just the noises sometimes get to me." I was thinking, but keeping to myself about these things, not wanting to send the wrong messages. "Oh, these are just the machines, especially the ice machine. Sounds get tricky when you're alone." "It's not the machines, it's the chairs." Now, I'm watching him as he realized my hesitation to say something and look around. I felt him staring at me as it confirmed it wasn't just the machines. Then he said it. "There's an old man that walks around here. Who is he?" "No one to concern yourself with. You leave them alone. They leave you alone." "There's also something else here, but I see the old man here more." "Try not to pay mind to it. It will only make you paranoid at night. Although it might make you work faster into closing the store. I don't recommend giving it much thought." We both suddenly heard a chair move as the legs went across the floor for a split second. It felt like it was them saying we were listening. I'm used to it, but I still jump from time to time. We soon get up and stand by the door to the store, waiting for our time before we had to leave. We left after a few months for a better job, and I stood there till my injury stopped me from working. But as I said, it was continuous there, but it still happened on a here and there basis. But I always heard about the chairs and the old man. Never looked into the history of the area, nor did I want to. So this happened a few years ago in my mother's apartment. Alone in the house again. I'm not sure where anyone was or went to, and I was laying in bed. It was dark outside, so I wasn't sure what time of night it was. I would say maybe 8 to 11. I was asleep, dreaming of whatever it was I was dreaming. More than likely a weird dream, as all the other dreams were. For some reason, part of me decided to wake up, and as I opened my eyes, something didn't feel right. Now I know about sleep paralysis. I've been through this many times. Can't move, can't talk, not sure whether you're still asleep or awake. But this was completely different. The atmosphere didn't feel right. It felt heavy. I heard something, but I wasn't sure what it was since I was just waking up. So I figured either my mom came home or I dropped something. As I was trying to move to sit up, I felt a sudden grip. A tight grip, like a predator catching its prey. Now I'm thinking it's paralysis, but then I felt a heavy frame over me, like a body pressed against me, trying to hold me down. Suddenly, there was a pain in my stomach, like something was putting their knee in my stomach to keep me pinned. More pressure was put into my stomach as I was trying to move, to toss to the side and curl up. The pain was in one spot, not all over, just a spot where a knee would be. Suddenly, I'm hearing some breathing. I don't feel the air, but I can hear it. Then I felt a hand on my face, like someone grabbed my jaw and slowly made my head turn to its side. I'm laying there moving my arm slowly, but unable to fully function it. Then it happened. Whispers were heard in my ear, talking but at a fast pace I couldn't catch up to. But I heard certain words being said. This time I felt actual breath in my ear. My body still felt heavy from whatever was on me, and my mobility was completely shot. All I could do was breathe and feel, and the pain was getting more intense. Within the whispers, all I could hear were demands. It was like listening to a spirit box. You could only hear certain words coming out of all the noise you were hearing. I don't remember all the words, but they were pills, take, bathroom. I'm not sure how long it went on since I was trying to figure out what, who, and why. I kept squirming on my bed as the whispering continued. Finally, I felt the heaviness disappear off me, and I flung up to sit up with a heavy pant and held my stomach, where I felt the pressure. I immediately rolled off the bed and looked at it, wondering what the hell just happened. The atmosphere was back to normal. There was no one else in the room, but something said look. When I looked, my closet door was slightly opened. In the mid to late 90s, my mother bought me a helium balloon that had Belle from Beauty and the Beast on both sides. It was rather big, about the size of a medium sofa cushion. It was a pretty balloon, and I loved it a lot. Over time, I was enjoying it here and there, till it was just still floating about the house. That's cool. Balloons do that and slowly fade away from the air. Fine. Cool. But I realized something. It would be in every room I was in, on its own. I didn't think much of it at first, so I'm just ignoring it, but after a while, I was catching it floating in my direction little by little. I was literally following me everywhere I went. It wasn't like a fast or quick pace, but at its own pace, it would follow me. I was in the living room, and it was just chilling in the corner, still in the air floating. Both of us just sitting there. Without thinking, I got up off the sofa and went towards my bedroom to look for something. Within a few minutes, I look up and see the balloon floating at my door as if waiting for me to invite it in. I watch like, what the fuck? Again, not thinking. Maybe the air and all. This went on for days, and it took very long for it to lose its air. Whenever I moved, it wasn't too far behind. I would be in the shower, and when I leave, the balloon is at the door like a dog waiting. The balloon was found in rooms that had no explanation on how it got there, when it was touching the ceiling and had, in no way possible, been able to pass the door frames without any help. One day, it was in my bedroom. Fine, whatever. No, not fine. I was in the living room just chilling, and suddenly I saw it floating towards the living room in the hallway. It stopped at the entrance of the living room and floated towards a corner and just sat there. I'm alone, so how did I get out of my room to begin with? After that, I started being petrified of the balloon. I didn't go near it, and I avoided it like you would anyone on the streets. My mom wanted to release the air so the whole thing could be over with, but I didn't let her. I'm not sure why, honestly, but the balloon made me uncomfortable. Even when the air was half gone from it, it still floated around the house like a stepdad. That's when it made it easier to get into rooms, and I would have to close my damn door to prevent it from entering. The worst days were when I went to sleep and woke up in the morning with the balloon hovering over or by my bed. Finally, the damn thing died off, and I think my mum folded it up and either threw it away or put it away for a keepsake. No more birthday balloons, and if I do get them, I undo them at the end of the day. First encounter was with my stepfather at the time. My mother and my brother were living in a rented house of a suicide victim. Of course, they didn't tell my mom or my stepfather about it when they first rented, but the neighbours did tell us after a month of living there. So at first, everything is fine, only an odd feeling about the garage and the dead forest behind the house. And when I say dead forest, I mean like a straight line of dead trees that just keep going for miles. But when you look to the left and to the right of the house, the rest of the forest was green and luscious. Anyways, my mum was working at night, so we would be with her boyfriend from 8 PM to 5 AM. During the daylight, we kept seeing black shadows going by in the corner of our eyes. But you'd look, and nothing was there. Until me and my brother saw it on the floor, going up to the attic. But it wasn't really an attic, more like an empty space between the roof and the house. One night, everything was shaking, like as if there was a huge storm outside the windows. And the door was shaking, then the TV went static, and my brother was catatonic. I was faced with my stepfather looking at me with the creepiest smile I've ever seen. And he said to me that the banging I was hearing was monsters trying to get in, and that we would get eaten alive, and he just kept going, saying weird stuff to scare me, with the blackest of eyes, like his pupil was so huge. And he was another person telling the story about those monsters outside. I know I'm going to sound crazy, but at one point, I saw a wolf-like figure with red eyes at the door of the patio, transforming into a man, like black figure with yellowish eyes. I was so scared, I can't believe I didn't pass out or something. I kept looking back at my brother and calling his name, but he had no response, only dead staring at the static of the TV, looking like a total zombie. Meanwhile, the doors and windows were still shaking and banging. Then, after what felt like a real-life nightmare that I couldn't wake from, I remember I looked back at my stepfather and saw 3 white female figures standing behind him looking at me, with a smile that I can't explain. But it felt like they were saying to me, "You're safe and you're not alone." And I felt this courage overcome the fear, and then grabbed the arm of my stepfather and yelled at him to stop it now. Looking straight into those black eyes, seeing the pupils shrinking back to normal in a matter of seconds, like whatever was in him was gone. And suddenly, I was face to face with a scared and panicked grown man that kept asking me what had happened. seeing that I was in tears and my brother was white, looking dead on the couch. The TV went back to normal. No more banging. Everything had stopped suddenly. I asked him if we could leave the house for the night until my mum comes back. He then took the keys of the car and we stayed in the car a couple of streets away from the house and waited for my mum to come back in the early morning. I was confused and mad at him. I didn't want to speak to him and told everything to my mom the next day. And the following week, we were moving from that house and leaving him behind. Apparently, he had summoned a demon of his friend a couple of months prior to moving into that house. And he was having suicidal thoughts and losing parts of his days that he couldn't remember. He felt like he was going crazy, and with reasons was getting pretty scared. They even went to a priest anyway. That's the end of the story of my first encounter with the paranormal. When I was 10 years old, I was sleeping over at my friend's apartment in the same complex as me. It was a late summer night when I suddenly woke up not feeling so good for some reason. So I went to the window to breathe in some air, thinking it was probably a nightmare that I just couldn't remember, which was weird to me, because I always do. Anyways, my friends are dead asleep in the same room as me, as I'm at the window. First, I look around at the top of the trees in the sky. My eyes go down towards the street in front of me. Then I see a man all dressed in black, with a black ski mask that only showed his eyes staring right up at our window, staring at me. He wasn't moving a finger, just standing there looking at me. I wake up my friends, telling them to look down at the street, which they immediately did, but now I had my friends looking back at me like I was crazy, saying to me that they couldn't see anything, that there was no one. Mind you, at this point, I'm just crying hysterically, telling them that he's right there in front of them, but they couldn't see him. They eventually went and woke the 17-year-old so that she could come and try to calm me down. And I did after a while. Went back to sleep. That was the end of it. I never saw anything else after that. Something bizarre is happening to me on my commute home from work lately. I don't know how to explain it, other than that it is seemingly taking longer than usual to get home. I've worked the same job and location for the past 6 years. The only more recent change in my routine is a switch from third to second shift, so now I'm leaving work at midnight instead of arriving. My commute is just shy of an hour usually, and largely on back roads. I don't encounter many other cars, and if anything, the drive should be shorter now due to decreased traffic at this hour. However, for the past couple of weeks, I've been arriving home sometimes up to 40 plus minutes later than I should. I can't quite pinpoint the cause, but last night I noticed an odd sensation about 3/4 through my commute after I'm back in my hometown, but still on some pretty remote roads. Just long stretches of wooded back road that basically all look the same. It was very dark, and I was easing to a stop at an intersection when all the noise seemed to drop out. The engine, the radio that was on fairly low, and any ambient noise around me. As if someone was turning down the volume knob on life. It seemed like it was happening for an extended amount of time, or my reaction to the situation took much longer than it should. But I finally made the turn onto the next road, and the sensation vanished. I was so weirded out by the whole thing, I failed to check the time, which I'm kicking myself for now. I arrived home almost 20 minutes late. I have wondered if it was possibly falling asleep, but I'm always very alert when driving, and I'm awake for a few hours after arriving home most days. Also, I recalled a strange sensation feeling vaguely familiar, but maybe that's just the memory of it playing tricks on me. I feel like something is happening on these roads in the early morning hours. I'm beginning to dread my commute now. Has anyone experienced anything like this? So I experienced this a couple of times a week, and I'm wondering if anyone has had some similar experiences. Right when I'm about to drift off to sleep, I hear really loud talking from numerous voices. The voices are never my own, and they're always overlapping each other. I hear parts of conversations, whispers, yelling, screaming, laughing, and even people speaking in different languages. I always have the sensation that I'm surrounded by people, and then I suddenly snap awake again. Other times, I visualize colourful shrinking and expanding pictures or objects in my mind before I go into a deep sleep. They always change size rapidly and make weird noises as they change. I can feel as if I'm tasting the colours of the objects and can feel their emotions. This has happened when I was awake a few times too. Like when I'm in a stressful situation where I dissociate and I visualize things around me changing. A lot of the time, it's a person that I'm talking to. For as long as I remember, I've had this happen in some form. Not sure if I experienced this as a child, but I do remember it as a teenager. The expanding and shrinking thing doesn't happen as often anymore, but the voices do on occasion. I want to know why this happens. Just to preface, about 3 years ago is when I had this paranormal experience. It happened in July 2016. I'm a night owl, and I've always had a hard time going to bed at a reasonable hour, since childhood. Especially during this period of my life, I was nearing the end of a very bad time in my life, where I was hospitalized a year prior due to mental health issues. Because I had no job at the time, I often stayed up as late as I liked and worked on projects, sometimes until dawn. I liked the comfort the night brought me and the quietness of it all. I really enjoyed being the only one awake, and never once considered that it could be scary. I was used to it. At this time, I wasn't sure about the paranormal, and it was something I never thought about much. I wouldn't say I didn't believe in it entirely, but I was very skeptical. So I still lived with my parents. My mom often got up during the night to check on me. Even though it always annoyed me a bit, I understand she was just worried about me. She would tell me that it's late and I need to sleep. She slowly stopped doing it after a while because she realized there was no point, and I went to bed when I wanted to. I was also doing a lot better at this point mentally and was much more stable, and I was starting a new job the next week. So back to that night. It was around 3:30 AM, and I was awake in my room, drawing and watching Netflix. I had my door shut, and it was just about to turn the lights off to go to sleep. I figured I should at least try to lay down and sleep, even though I wasn't tired. As I was putting my coloured pencils away and turning off Netflix, I heard something knock on my door really loudly, 3 times. And it sounded like something was scratching the door along with it. Expecting it to be my mom asking me while I was still up, I replied, "Yeah." Then no one answered. Then I heard 3 loud knocks and scratching noises again. The scratching sounded like someone's nails running down from the top of the door. I said, "Yeah, what is it? What do you want?" No one answered again. So I started thinking that whoever was knocking on my door was trying to scare me. It didn't make any sense. Why would my family be trying to scare me? They had all been passed out for hours. I'm not the type to do something like that at 3 in the morning. Then it happened again. This time I was like, "Hello? Hello?" Silence again. I even for a split second thought that maybe it was my dog trying to get in my room, but I just as quickly debunked that idea. My dog couldn't get upstairs where the bedrooms are because he had a locked, heavy-duty gate that blocked the top of the stairs. He was a little dog too and can't get over it. The knocking and scratching was so deliberate and with such force that there was no way it was my dog. It rattled my door as it happened. It was always done in the same pattern as the knock before, just like a person would do. Then it happened one last time. I didn't say anything this time. I suddenly realized how bizarre this was and had an intense feeling of fear wash over me. I was too scared to open my door to check and see if anything was there, and I felt like if I did, something would harm me. My instinct told me that I would be inviting whatever this thing was into my room if I did. I sat on my bed for about 15 minutes, staring at the door in pure shock. I finally had the courage to get up and turn off the lights, but I kept my lamp on that still lit up the whole room. There was no way I was sleeping in the dark. I texted my boyfriend 30 minutes after the incident, telling him what just happened. He works early in the morning, so he responded right away, telling me not to investigate any further and try to sleep. I barely slept any after what happened, so I was one of the first people up in the morning. I told everyone what happened and no one took me seriously. They said I must have imagined it because I was really tired or something. I was wide awake and lucid. I asked everyone if they knocked on my door and none of them did. I thought for sure someone at least heard it too, because the seemingly demonic scratching and knocking was loud as hell. They said no. I knew they weren't lying, and my dog was still downstairs where we left him the night before. This freaked me out. A lot. I couldn't stop thinking about it because I couldn't explain it. I tried thinking of a rational explanation, but came up with nothing. After this is when I started to become very interested in the paranormal. So there's an infamous apparition that appears at the head of the trail. It usually happens around sunset. Many have reported seeing a man wearing 70s clothing at the top of the cliff staring down at you. Then he runs at an impossible angle down the cliff with a smile on his face, and just as he's about to hit the trail, he vanishes in thin air. It's been seen for decades and many police calls have been made because of it. Law enforcement is aware of this phenomenon and are told to ignore it. Many believed it was a real person. There's also a mine that collapsed up there, killing many. Lots of rock climbers have fallen to their death. There have been black magic rituals there. Many hikers and people have gone missing, and also, Ted Bundy killed someone up there as well. The Battle of Fort Utah took place there. Many natives and Mormon settlers were slaughtered. Not to mention, it's known for Bigfoot sightings and other weird shape-shifting. The canyon is full of spirits and activity. You're bound to at least experience something, even if you just get a mild sense of being watched or the creeps. I've hiked up there many times before I even knew it was haunted, just because it's one of the most beautiful canyons in Utah County. Every time I went, I would feel very paranoid once I got deep into the canyon. One of these times I was with two friends and their two dogs. We had made it pretty far and had been hiking for hours at this point. The sun was setting, and we decided to take a water break. As soon as we stopped, we heard loud whooshing and banging noises coming from the left of the trail and the trees. My friend's dogs immediately bolted down the trail with the hair standing up on their backs. The sound was not like anything we'd heard before. We thought it could be an animal. Maybe it was, but I don't know what kind of animal could make that noise. I can't describe it, but I still remember exactly how it sounded. The closest thing I can think of is the sound as a very large drum. I felt a strong urge to get the fuck out of there, and so did everyone else. Needless to say, we didn't finish the hike that day. After that experience, we did some research on the canyon and found out about the hauntings. This triggered a curiosity to explore. So I rounded up the gang of ghost hunters and we decided to go on a Friday. We decided to go at sunset. We packed lots of ghost hunting gear and set off preparing to hike in the dark. We have a ghost device that has always been accurate in our investigations that we used throughout this whole experience. It has an EMF detector and radar. Its most useful device is the one where it repeats words off the EVP and shows it spelled out on the screen. So as soon as we were 5 minutes up the trail, we all collectively agreed that we all felt more energy from the left side of the canyon. So we decided to take the left fork when we went to it. One of the first things the device said was 3. It repeated it many times throughout the hike. We assumed it was answering our question about how many spirits were there at first. The device detected many energy points on the radar as soon as the sun went down. We heard chains, humming, whistling and clanking noises throughout our whole hike. It always came from the left side of the canyon. It seemed to be following us. We finally arrived at one of the mining caves on the trail. We put the flashlight on the mouth of the cave and noticed this particular cave is kind of sunk halfway into the ground. So you basically have to crawl into a hole that goes underground. It's a very tight squeeze and barely one person can go at a time. One of our group members, Brian, decided he was going to try to look down there for a second. We all had a very bad feeling about it and protested against it. He insisted he was just going down for a second. The radar was going off. It was showing a lot of strong activity coming from the cave direction. Brian kneeled down and started to climb in. As soon as he got one leg in the hole of the cave, the device immediately said leg. We told Brian to stop and step away. He finally listened. We decided to stop and record an EVP session at the mouth of the cave. We were hearing the same distant voices, clanking and whistling as we did before, but this time a little louder. We set the voice recorder on the ground and started asking questions. We weren't getting much response, but the noises continued. We were huddled around the voice recorder when I heard whispering right behind my head. It felt like someone was breathing down my neck. Everyone heard it and decided to end the recording. We all contemplated turning around and leaving, but Jenny and Brian insisted on going further. We decided, since we made it this far, we might as well keep going. We hadn't seen anyone else on the trail in hours, when we finally saw some BYU college students hiking back down as they passed us. As soon as they were approaching us, the activity on the radar and device disappeared instantly. It was almost like the spirits didn't want them to know they were there. So we passed all these different bridges labelled with a number. Every bridge we passed, the activity and energy increased, as did the noises. One of my friends in the group, Jenny, had some psychic abilities, and she's seen spirits ever since she flatlined in a hospital years ago. She's always been good at steering us in the right direction. She seemed to know things before they happen. She mentioned to us that there were spirit guides with us protecting us the whole time and was possibly warning us of something. I didn't think much of it at first. Then we passed bridge number 3. As soon as we did, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. It was a hot summer night and we were sweating the entire hike. Then we were all putting on our jackets. There was also immediately a very bad, pungent rotting smell and the sound of water, even though we were by a dry riverbed. We got to the part of the trail where the path narrows and it goes into a thick forested area. It was dark the whole trip, but we could see some without the flashlights because of the moon. But this area has thick trees blocking the moonlight, and you could barely see 15 feet in front of you, even with a flashlight. Everything inside me was telling me not to keep walking. My friend Kayla agreed. We stopped for a minute to talk, and everyone was huddled in a circle, except Jenny. She was looking in the distance up the riverbed. We were thinking about turning around because we began to all feel very unsafe and a sense of doom. As we were talking about leaving, the device said, "Go. Big." As soon as we heard that, we booked it down the trail. My heart felt like it was going to fall out of my chest. We were running as fast as we could. It felt like someone was chasing us. Finally, after passing all the bridges, we finally slowed down because we were out of breath. We all sighed a breath of relief because we felt safer as soon as we crossed Bridge 1 again. We were all laughing about what happened and were making jokes to lighten the mood. Jenny then told us sternly to not let our guard down. She said we still had a way to go. She told Brian to shine a light behind us the rest of the way because we were being followed. We were hoping the light would push back whatever was there. We were walking back for maybe 10 minutes when suddenly my friend Kayla began seizing and shaking. Her entire right side of her body was moving uncontrollably. She was using her left arm to try to stop her right arm from spasming. She was hyperventilating, and Jenny put her arms around her as we stopped to let her calm down. We heard humming all around us. Eventually, she went back to normal, but was still in complete shock. We were walking as fast as we could down that trail. Then, the device said protect, and the radar showed a circle around us, forming with all these dots of energy. It was super cool. We felt safe for a while. Then 30 minutes later, we started hearing loud noises. Jenny told us all to just ignore them and think of something positive. She told me to picture a cute little bunny with brown eyes instead. We all joked about it. Then 3 minutes later, something was rustling in the bushes and then jumps out a bunny with brown eyes in the center of the trail. As soon as it hit the ground, the device said intruder. I didn't think about this coincidence until we reached the bottom. I do recall us thinking it was weird because it looked like a domesticated rabbit in the woods. Kayla was still not doing well and was feeling sick and weak. We made it to the end of the trail and decided to do a protective ritual after the device said protect again. Before we turned off the device, we were talking about what could have attacked Kayla when the device said monster. We ended our session and decided to take Kayla home and make sure she was safe, as she was still very shaken up. I talked to Jenny the next day and asked her what she was looking at when we were all huddled in a circle talking at the riverbed. She said she saw 4 spirits. 2 were benign, 1 was evil, and 1 was something she never felt before. She saw something attack Kayla when she started seizing. She believes it was the last one. Jenny and Brian also brought up the weird connection to the bunny. I never thought about it that way. They believed it to be a shapeshifter and possibly the unexplainable entity that attacked Kayla. Kayla still had many problems afterwards, and we eventually put a spell on her house to protect her, and the issues finally subsided. The reason I'm retelling this story is because I finally watched the movie The Witch on Netflix after many people told me it was good. It's been more than a year since that experience, but when I watched the movie, there was a shape-shifting rabbit in it. It made me do a little more research on what happened that night, and I came across many sources claiming this is a phenomenon that happens everywhere. Apparently, there's a shapeshifter known to take the form of a rabbit called Puka. Native Americans are aware of this kind of shapeshifter and believe it to have a connection to the underworld. Many believe that one of the other forms it takes is a beautiful young woman that walks through the woods. Prior to this incident, I've never experienced anything remotely paranormal, so this is one of the reasons why I never truly spoke of what I went through at the time. Being in denial was easier than me trying to understand something that I couldn't rationally grasp. It all started with me moving in with 2 other girls in a dormitory in the capital of my country. This dorm was exclusively for female students, and it has 3 major blocks. It's owned by the Ministry of Higher Education, and is considered public housing facility for people who do not want or cannot afford to private rent apartments or housing. We were given at random a room in the lowest block of the building, Block C. The room we were given was numbers 903, and it was the room before the last in the order of the rooms in the block. At the beginning, none of us were suspicious of anything, although we did notice the shape of a visible handprint on the front door of the room. The handprint looked tiny, like that of a small child. We didn't give it much thought, and we concluded that it must have been left from a previous paint coating of the door. That was only the beginning of it all. As time went by and the school year rolled in, each of us started to notice little strange things happening around the room. It was small things like putting stuff in a certain place and finding it somewhere else. For so long, we kept thinking that we were just being forgetful, and we're not paying as much attention as we should, due to school stress, exams and the such. However, that changed for me when I started to experience things differently. The first true incident that made me start to question everything was when I was in the shower. The room had a tiny shower, a small toilet and a kitchen sink attached to it. Between the main and the bigger part of the room and the shower was a door. The door has a latch on that you can turn left or right to lock and unlock. I was by myself that day. Both of my roommates were out. It was close to mid-afternoon. I came back from college and wanted to take a shower before taking a nap. I gathered towels and shampoo and made sure to close the windows. Then I went into the shower, leaving the door unlocked and wide open. I was alone, so I didn't feel the need to lock or close the shower's door. I started up the shower's head, and I started opening the shampoo bottle when suddenly, and out of nowhere, the door to the shower shut so violently that the whole room actually shook. I heard the moment the latch on the door turned right to lock me in. I was so startled that I almost hit my head on the floor of the shower. I shouted out because I thought it was one of my roommates coming home early for sure and not realising I was in there. I kept calling for the girls and telling them to unlock the door, and that it wasn't funny. The door wouldn't budge, and the lock remained firmly on. At some point, I started to get seriously uneasy because if no one was going to open the lock from the other side, I essentially was trapped in the shower. I kept banging on the door until my neighbour in the next room heard me. She came around and talked to me through the wall of her shower. The shower and toilets were built in a way that they aligned with those of the adjacent rooms. She asked me if I was alright, and I told her I wasn't, and that I was locked in and I needed to get out. She called the head of the dorm and they brought a spare key to open up my room and unlock the shower's door so I could be let out. I was literally shaking, and the dorm's head kept asking if I needed medical care. They gently laid me on my bed, and within all that commotion, it occurred to me that the room was empty, and none of my roommates were there. I was so traumatized that I didn't even want to entertain the thought of what actually happened. I've always been terrified of small spaces, and being forcefully locked into one almost causes me to lose consciousness. When the girls came home after sunset, they were so concerned for me, and they swore up and down that they haven't returned to dorms until that very moment. As I calmed down, I started to go back in my mind, checking over things, like the fact that the front door to the room was locked, and that I actually closed the windows as well before getting into the shower to not get a cold. I was losing my mind going back and forth over what happened thousands of times in my head. I heard the door slam shut, and I heard the lock torn. I did not imagine those things. Then how the fuck did I get locked in if no one else was on the other side of the door? It's after that when things started to get creepy and way too uncomfortable for me. After the whole thing, I sat down with my roommates and I told them what I went through. I told them to tell me if I was going insane or if something was wrong with me. At that moment, they opened up to me about weird stuff that they've also been experiencing. One of them spoke of how she was repeatedly feeling the sensation of a cold breath over her neck while she slept or napped. She told us that she was losing sleep because of it, but was too scared to mention it. The other spoke of voices she would hear at random times, and shadows dancing on the walls during both day and light time. We tried to rationalize what we were experiencing, but it didn't reassure us in any way or form. We started staying out as long as we could, just so that we spend as little time in the room as possible. I even stayed at a friend's apartment a couple nights because I couldn't stomach sleeping in that room again. Things did not get any better. In fact, it got worse after that. This is me recalling the most terrifying night of my life. We were all asleep in the room when I suddenly woke up. I had no pressing need to pee. I wasn't hungry or thirsty. I was just startled awake for no immediate reason. It was around 1 AM because I do remember checking my phone. Moonlight was strong and it was a bright night. I laid my head back on the pillow, eyes still open, trying to relax back to sleep, when I noticed something was moving on the wall. At first I thought it was a shadow of something in the room or on the balcony, but it wasn't. It was a shadow of a human child holding something in its hand. It kept moving back up and down the wall like it was running or playing around. I legitimately froze. I instantly tried to block my breathing. My heart was beating like crazy that I could hear it drumming frantically in my ears. It was like my entire body was suddenly made of wood. I swear I've never felt more scared or anxious in my life before. It's the weirdest feeling ever, and no words can properly describe it. All I could think of was, I'm going crazy. There's no way I'm seeing what I'm seeing. I'm totally still asleep and dreaming. Gonna wake up soon now. Just a dream to me. Just a dream. The shadow stopped suddenly and turned in my direction. In a perfectly crystal clear voice, a giggling young girl spoke up to me saying, "Come play with me." I almost had a heart attack at that moment. I don't know how I did it, but I sprang up from the bed like a crazy person and started to violently shake my roommates awake. I told them that I'm not going to stay in this room for a moment longer, and that I didn't care even if I had to sleep on a mattress on the hallway outside. They were confused and worried, half awake. I didn't care to linger. I just gathered my pillow and blanket and left. I went to a friend in another room in the building and spent the night with them. Next morning, I skipped class and went to the dorm's head and told her to find me an open spot in another room and that I didn't care what block and with whom. That day, I went back to the cursed room, packed all my stuff and moved in with one of my roommates to a different room in the furthest block possible. The other roommates told me that she couldn't leave because there weren't enough empty spots for other rooms and that she's fine with staying. I told her to knock herself out, but I'm never stepping a foot in that room ever again. And yes, I never went back there. The following year, I rented a house with the same roommate that left with me that day, and we never spoke again of the shit that happened in that dorm ever again.